By no means did I know what the end goal was. I didn't think, get a job at Thrasher. It wasn't like on my mood board or, you know, my list. Like, in hindsight, I was kind of prepping my resume for that type of work without really knowing what I was doing, but it was certainly not expected. So whenever Burnett called and offered me that position, it was like...
Watching the way he has approached illustration, design, and just art in general, he was a far superior artist ever since I've known him.
You know, he's just a really good person. He's got a pretty crazy sense of humor that's pretty great.
I think he's one of those rare dudes that really has a style. You know, I think his style just comes out of him.
His drawings are softer and sweet, and the way he writes is more just like from the everyday perspective of a skateboard dude.
If you don't know him, he's a super cool person, and anyone can go up and say hi to him, and there's no kind of ego involved, and very down to earth.
He's got a distinct voice across all media, from skateboard to ditch maneuver. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely looking like the summer of Sieben out there. Watch out in the ditches when Mikey S rolls through.
This is our local attraction here. It's just a giant concrete pecan. This is it. It's a little... This is the one.
If you wanted to live in Texas and you weren't into football and being banker or whatever kind of career type thing, Austin was the only place you were going to be living at that point in time, because Austin was like a little San Francisco kind of type thing.
The thing that immediately got me really excited about Mike is he didn't leave. Like, he kind of stayed in Texas. And to me, I thought at that age, well, if I don't move to California, there's no way I can have this job. It all seemed very California-based back then, and was and still is.
I don't know about you guys, when I was about 12 or 13, that's when I started skating a ton, but I just remember I did not want to be at my house ever again. It was like I just wanted to be out with my friends. Everything I've ended up doing was very reactionary to the community that I lived in. So I think that helped like strengthen my resolve that I was not gonna end up, I don't know, turning into a cowboy. I don't know what the alternative would have been. Yeah, growing up here, we, late 80s, would look at skateboarding magazines, and it was mostly vert ramps. I didn't know of any vert ramps down here, but we had these, so they kind of seemed like a ramp. So we would just try to emulate what we saw in the magazines here in the ditches.
He's a real skateboarder, right? So you're not gonna be a 20 to 30-year-old skateboarder if you don't have some real grit, right? You're not gonna keep it going that long. And you know, he pursued a life of fine art. Like, he had a hustle, like hustle culture was in him, or you can't do that either, unless you're a trust fund kid, and he's not.
I was very much interested in like skateboard art, so I was following what was going on in New York at the Alleged Gallery, and all the artists I looked up to were skateboarders, not necessarily just fine artists.
Hey, we're here at Alleged Gallery, New York, with Ed Templeton and Bruce LaBruce.
We're here at my opening in New York City, an art show called The Golden Age of Neglect. And these are all the people that came to see it. I'm pretty excited about it.
There was a grand history of board graphics and an interesting history of illustration that had been features in magazines and videos and, you know, album covers and things outside of skateboarding that were also really inspiring to both of us. And at that time, there was probably less than 20 people or 25 people on Earth that did it. And I remember my parents being like, that's not really a job.
I was making a lot of art at the time and a lot of paintings, and had no clue of how to even talk to galleries, how to contact galleries. I didn't know what a portfolio should look like. So I'd gone to a few galleries and shown them work and just no interest at all. I was super inspired by zines, and I didn't even have any. No one I knew made skate zines. I would just see pictures of them in magazines. It's like I didn't grow up with them. And then in the era when I started making them, they were kind of like already phased out as far as like the internet was around. So people were going from this to like online content. And I think during that time I was like, man, if I started making zines, that would probably be memorable. Someone's like, why are you making a zine now? Why didn't you just email me this stuff? It's like, well, because you would delete the email. You might hold on to the zine. Fugazi was playing a show here in Austin. My buddy Kerry Jackson said, hey, Ed Templeton and Deanna are going to be at the show. They're following the band around. Gave him a stack of zines. He was very thankful, super nice. He got back to California. I think Mike Burnett was at his house and he handed off the stack of zines to Mike Burnett. It was like, maybe you'll enjoy these.
I got started in magazine stuff, making zines, so it was just super cool to see somebody else years later making these super funny ones.
This is a zine, Google image search just for the word goth. This was like when Google image search had just come out. The girl about to eat her rat.
We gave him some sort of bullshit retainer, like a few $100 a month, but it was like you could ask him to do stuff. Could you do an illustration for this, or could you want to write something? That was like kind of his contribution, but it was pretty loose.
So it wasn't like a full-time job, but I was in the masthead and I had a page every month. So it was like every issue that you want to be in there, just send your stuff in, you know, have it in by the middle of the month. It'll get in the mag. So it was pretty much just a blank canvas to do what I was doing with the zines, but in the magazine, which obviously more people were going to see Thrasher than see the zines I made 100 copies of.
Sieben and them call me OG because it's like I was skating on steel wheels. You know, this is like, because I'm, like I said, I'm 67. So like I grew up on the Gulf Coast. Beach Boys said it was cool to go surfing, and I couldn't, my parents weren't taking me to the beach every day, so I'd get on a skateboard and ride that and think I'm surfing. All of my paintings and the murals and everything are signed your name here. And the reason is because if you look at the bottom of this thing to see who did this and you see your name here, it's like, yep, come on. You can make clothes, you can music, photography, filming, like what, you know. And first thing I was going to do was, which is what I did, was I'm going to do people that influenced me. And it was like John Coltrane, Jim Thorpe, Luke Gary, and just all this kind of stuff, you know, just Bruce Brown for Endless Summer, just things. So hoping that somebody's going to walk in here, switch will get flipped, and they'll be just like, well, who, and look them up and maybe do something from it or learn something about them or whatever. It's celebrating all these people.
This is a mural that Tim Kerr and I did. We're at Pease Elementary in downtown Austin. My kids used to go to school here, and I love Tim and love his work and know he's done a lot of murals at elementary schools. So I roped him in, and the two of us painted this a couple years ago.
You'll recognize the Sieben because he's got two kind of their mascots. He had drawn mascots for their t-shirts, you know, and stuff, kind of helping the school out. And then I drew, like, I tried to find out, like, well, who's everybody's favorite lunch lady, you know, here or stuff, you know, just people like that.
I got invited to be in a show in New York. It was kind of the first art show that I'd ever done. It was a show called Decipher. It was a big group show, but I went out to New York thinking that I was going to have arrived. I was like, oh, now I'll just go out and I'll be a famous artist. And that was pretty easy. Instead, went out to New York, didn't sell anything, came home, not dejected by any means, but I saw kind of behind the curtain of what it took to throw an art show, and started actively looking for a retail space in Austin, and very quickly just rented a downtown space for $500 a month, all utilities paid, and opened a gallery called Camp Fig.
I was just involved with that gallery in the sense of hanging out and drinking beer, and really like just kind of learning from the shows that were happening and what he was doing, you know. He was definitely more tapped into the street art and skate art world at the time, you know, and so he was bringing in certainly people that had never had art shows in Austin. But no, I mean, being around that scene for sure, like, shaped what I do to this day, for sure. It was like, those were some pretty formative years creatively.
Were you putting some of your own artwork up while this was happening? Were you doing shows in there yourself? Was it like more like friends shows? Was it like, you know?
No, I was definitely trying to showcase my own work. By no means was I in every show though, so it was curating different shows and bringing in artists, and then where I thought I would fit in, I would insert my work, or maybe once a year do a 2-person show with a friend. But no, it was very much like a calculated move on my end to get my work in front of people. This is the first board graphic I ever did, which is a dude pooping wearing full pads.
In the words of the great Todd Francis, the only things that sell skateboards are either things that are really funny and make kids laugh, or things that are tough and make kids feel tough.
I was aware of Sieben. I was like a fan of his work. You know, I'd seen his zines, and I didn't really know him though. So I just kind of called him or emailed him or something, and I just told him, I was like, dude, we have an opportunity to do this thing. You know, what are you doing? Do you have any other obligations? And I got him on board, and the whole thing just kind of escalated pretty quickly. And then that was Bueno.
There weren't a lot of just like heavy art-driven brands apart from Toy Machine, but as far as a brand who just had one artist doing all the graphics, it seemed like a lot of like logo-driven stuff at this time, a lot of like type treatments and just like more graphic design kind of stuff. We just wanted drawings on the boards.
I mean, and his stuff is it's so screen print friendly and graphic friendly that other people at other companies got to see that stuff and be like, oh man, tell this guy to make something that looks like this.
There was a line of kids' clothes in Target. Swear to God, every image on there, you could find the Sieben source material. The little funky jump ramp, the little teddy bear guy flying off, it was crazy.
The late 80s, it was still like very exploratory, or it was kind of like, what can go on the bottom of a board? What about this weird thing? Anything can go on the bottom of a board. So even if I draw something and it doesn't feel like a skate graphic, I'm like, well, if I can figure out the design or the layout, it could be.
His drawings kind of look, there's a similar note to everything he does, because I think he was kind of meant to do it. You know, there's a natural style in what he's doing that's based probably on how he drew when he was a little kid.
Most kids draw, right? And then a lot of kids stop around 3rd to 5th grade. They just kind of phase out of it. And I think it was something I don't even know if I was necessarily good at it. I just did it a lot. So like I like children's book illustrations. I like this gory 80s skate graphic stuff, and just try to mash them together. So, which I think my stuff still looks like that. Even if I'm trying to draw something that's like gross or creepy, it has this like tinge of like cuteness to it, which I no longer try to avoid. I just embrace that.
There's always a duality, right? You look at it and you're like, oh, these bold lines and these bright colors and these funny characters, but they're always like masked. And there's usually like maybe some text that alludes to kind of a darkness, or like a, you know, like there's another side of the joke.
This is probably the edgiest graphic I have done to date. I don't know if I would do it now, but when I was young and full of angst. Bueno had been like 100% just my art. So I was just like, what I would be drawing anyway, or drawing for like a painting, or that's what was going on the boards. That thing went so south. It was like such a bad experience when it ended. And I was doing that for a job at that point. It was like, that was my job. And then I didn't have a job.
I mean, the end of Bueno, for me especially, not especially, but personally, that's when I decided to not be a professional skateboarder anymore too. Because I was like, This was the best scenario, and I was bummed, like really bummed, because we really loved it, and people seemingly really loved it.
When you're a young art dude doing a job, like I said earlier, where there's a small amount of people that have the job, if you're lucky to get like a little bit of that job, it doesn't pay well. It just wasn't a big roster of artists that were aiming at something that not only were there not very many people doing it, it didn't pay well. So why would you go that route?
Definitely during that period, a lot of self-doubt of like, well, like, is there ever going to be a moment where something clicks and it leads to the next thing? Because I kind of felt like that's how it would work. You know, like I get one opportunity and I do really well, and then that builds. But there was a long period where there are just no opportunities.
He just sent me some mail. I don't even remember what it was. This was just an illustration that he just did on the envelope, but this became Roger. I lived for a period of time in Memphis, Tennessee, and Roger is from Memphis, Tennessee. So when I was just like a kid skating there, I met Roger. Such a rad skateboarder, and he influenced me a lot.
I interviewed at Girl and Chocolate about potentially working there, and that seemed like not a good fit for me. I just bought a house in Austin. I was like, I don't really want to move to LA right after I bought a house. I love Girl and Chocolate, but I was like, I'm not going to change the face of those brands. I'm going to be working within their parameters to make stuff look Girl and Chocolate. It's like, if we do our thing, it can be wide open.
So when we were formulating what would become Roger, we had like, lists of names and stuff, and then what if we just name it? Like you name a kid, just give him a name. And then that would lead to like being able to refer to it as your friend, Roger, or whatever. And then we were both like, oh, Roger, like Roger Sellner. And we were like, well, Roger Sellner is a rad dude, so we can it can just be Roger Sellner, but.
Did Roger know about this when this was happening?
No, I don't think so.
Does he know about it to this day?
I don't know. Maybe he'll see this. We never used his last name, so we don't owe him any money.
Then when we talked about starting a new board brand, I was like, I don't want it to feel like Bueno. I'm going to be drawing everything, but I was like, conceptually, I want it just to feel a little different. So I just started trying to think of like the dumbest visual jokes, dumbest puns that I could make. I feel like Bueno was lighthearted anyway, art-wise, but I was like, I just want this whole thing to feel like a giant joke. Just like, think of the dumbest graphic, draw it, and then make it, because there's no one telling us we couldn't.
We agreed to make one run of boards, and we put it on a credit card. If we sell them, great, we'll make more. If we don't, we got boards to skate for a while, right? We did it and got a pretty good response, sold them. So when we did that, that sort of escalated things, and it enabled us to like make a team and be a little more active.
No, skating for Roger was like the best decision I ever made. It's like a family type deal, which is kind of a huge plus skate-wise, but like, as friends and camaraderie and all that good stuff.
I probably met Sieben 15 years ago. Always looked up to him as like a local artist, and he was like one of the cool dudes, You're just like, damn, dude's doing like such cool stuff.
A lot of the Roger team was also the No Comply team also. This is kind of where we're just working together on things, and he's very tied in with us and our whole community and whole skate scene in Austin, and being his role at Thrasher magazine as well is, it's all pretty awesome tie-in.
Sieben started giving me boards in 2009, which was 14 years ago, and I haven't had to look elsewhere for boards since. I've skated pretty much all of his graphics. I had no idea what Roger was or Sieben. I was familiar with Bueno because of Nate Broussard, but I didn't know Sieben as the artist at all. And also just like a fan of Nate Broussard. So I'm like, Nate Broussard skates for Roger. Sieben, I don't really know this guy, but Nate Broussard, let's do it.
Anthony American. That's only if you win. Move in a little bit, Abraham.
there's, I think, more people here than I anticipated, which is great, but also a little nerve-wracking. Yeah, it's terrifying. I didn't know I was trying to get a job at Thrasher, even as like a staff member, but I was actively trying to be an artist. There have been long periods where no one's reaching out, you know, and I'm like, oh man, these other people are doing these cool things, or they're getting to travel and do art shows, and yeah, moments where I'm like, oh, maybe no one cares about what I do anymore.
If you're doing this stuff to get some sort of a name or money, you're gonna have a hard time. But if you're doing it because it's coming from here, take off.
During the COVID lockdown, I started skating a bunch of just little crusty ditch spots I was finding near my house. Started relearning some tricks and doing some tricks I'd never done. I thought, man, that'd be fun to just film a whole video part. I'll be 48 when it comes out.
A lot of this stuff, when you put your name on something, there's several ways you can project that to the public. And you gotta find a kind of graceful, humble way of presenting it, because we're not Michael Jordan. You know, we got a pen, it's different. And he's handled all of that really well, I think. And a lot of that, I think, is because he's down to earth, because he never left where he's from, and because he has a fucking family.
I'd been in the workforce for, you know, a number of years. I would work all day, and then I would make art until like 2 or 3 in the morning, like every night. And then I would wake up at 8 and I'd go work all day, and then I would stay up, and I was like making a ton of stuff and no one was responding to it.
You know, he started having a family pretty early and got married pretty young, and like there's a different, even in Texas where the cost of living is less than it is where I tried to do it, like there's a lot of pressure on him to like figure out how to turn this thing that's very not responsible into something very responsible.
I know he'd worked at like weird design firms and he just didn't want to do it. And then I think he kind of hit a wall where he realized like either it was not going to be possible. I remember him just saying, I need a job.
At that moment in my life, my wife and I found out we were having another child. I had been freelancing for a number of years and was just so stressed out. Like I thrived on the chaos of freelancing when I was younger. As I got a little older, I was not thriving with that uncertainty in my life. And so I was already trying to figure out whether I was going to go to grad school and try to get a job teaching, or it was a real turning point in my life. And the managing editor position came up at Thrasher during that time. Burnett told me they were looking to fill the position, and at that moment I was like,
Dun, 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 dun. Every month, this is the exciting part. Here's the thing, Thrasher, as much as everybody knows in their heart what they think it is, Thrasher is actually a lot of different people, a lot of different voices, and a lot of different kind of vibes.
He was just born to run Thrasher magazine. Like, it's as far as his knowledge of skateboarding and just how good he is at like editorial and like journalistic instincts. When we get content, I feel like as he's looking at it, he's already formulating a way that it makes sense in the magazine.
The writing is such a thankless task at the mag, and there's so few people that even want to do it. So just to have somebody who I knew could do it was a big bonus for me.
I remember Burnett asking, he was like, do you want to do this? He's like, it's not, he's like, I don't know what you're picturing. It's not an art job. Like, this is like putting a magazine together.
It was kind of like, well, there's this thing. I don't know if you want to do it. It's like an administrative job. It's not coming up with jokes all day.
I remember Tony Vitello came out. He's like, let's try it. Let's give it 3 issues and we'll see, you know, see how it's working. And then we never had a conversation about it after that. So that was almost 10 years ago. So I think I made it past the trial round there.
Once he realized oh yeah, I have to copy edit the magazine, I think he like took some like weekend seminars and like got a book, which is like initiative beyond and above what most of our people would do.
When I was a little kid, part of what I liked about Thrasher is it was intimidating.
No, I'm really happy I'm here. I never thought I'd really fit in here, you know. Here I am sucking down a light beer.
Making a new debut in society.
I think we gotta start somewhere. We're gonna work our way around 29 Newbury Street, and by the time we make it down to 338.
Yeah, this guy Jake, he's a heck of a guy.
It's like the ladder of success, one rung at a time, slowly but surely.
It was scary as fuck. And the dudes writing the articles were like, we're the guys, and this is fucking gnarly. And I was on the inside of it looking at all those dudes and being like, whoa, they really are that gnarly. You know, like I remember taking like print samples over there to get reviewed, and like, you know, those dudes were intimidating, and I was working for them.
So it's like the Thrasher of the 80s under Kevin Thatcher and Mofo is one thing, and then the early 90s with Jake and Bryce is another thing. And I tempered a lot of what Jake did, and then Sieben brought in like a certain level of silliness into what we do.
I mean, what I write, it's all comical writing, right? Like it's supposed to be humor writing, which was probably not always the tone of the magazine. So I always thought I'd just kind of like offset some of the harder edge stuff.
It's cool to have that kind of voice and that kind of talent as part of what we do, because if it was all tough guys, it's not gonna work. If it was all hell ride all the time. And I remember Jake used to tell him, he's like, hey, everything doesn't have to be funny. And he's like, I don't know, Jake, I like it funny. It's like, doesn't all have to be jokes. So it's good to have that kind of counterbalance.
It was a good time for a more approachable Thrasher. And I think just because it had gotten so fucking huge and the audience had gotten so huge, there was probably hundreds of times more kids reading it than there was when he and I were growing up on it. And he's just more down to earth. I think it made the audience feel like, oh, like, I don't have to be gnarly to look at this.
I think the people who were responding to what my contribution to the mag, which was not everybody, probably some people thought it was stupid or shouldn't be in there, but it seemed like it was younger people who also enjoyed art and humor. It gave us fellow art dorks a little a moment in the mag.
And it's not like the gnarly voices that he and I grew up on aren't as important, but I like thinking about the young kid that's like studying him, you know what I mean? And how down to earth, and like, he's got an important voice and people are listening.
Once we had him, I was always trying to get him to do stuff, and then he's like, I don't like to try to do anything that's supposed to look like anybody. He was like, what's he supposed to look like? And I showed him the picture, and I'm like, he's from the desert. So he wrote, from the desert, Brian Herman. I know when I'm bugging him because he goes, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. I know when he's annoyed with me because that's what he says. So I've picked up on that over the years.
I don't know if like, you know, the universe has these plans where everything, but I've felt like career-wise, it seems like things have always kind of come in waves like that, but some of it's probably like you start working on something and your name's being thrown around and then someone else is like, oh yeah, that person. Maybe we can get them to jump in on this thing. But in the last few years, it seemed like I went kind of a big stretch where, again, I work for the magazine, so I'm always working on something. I'm not just sitting around bored. But as far as like personal work or my aesthetic, it seemed like not a whole lot percolating.
In the back of my mind, I feel bad because I know he would rather not have to do any of this bullshit at Thrasher. Like, I don't think he really wants to do it. I think he wants to draw a little sheep playing a guitar. That's where I think his heart is like riding ditches, drawing pictures of creatures, dreaming about ditches, things like that.
Hi, I'm Michael Sieben, Vice President of Roger Skateboards Corp.
I had worked on a project with Adidas where we did a little short video piece that accompanied some shoes, which was my first time, other than just making little skate videos, like being in front of the camera. And I think Volcom was like, oh, that turned out pretty cool. And I was doing a lot of work with Volcom anyway, so they wanted to do something that felt episodic. But they just put the ball in my court. They're like, do you want to work on a show with us? We'll provide the platform, we can partner with Thrasher and make something. And the thought of it was terrifying. So I was like, I should probably do that. And I didn't know what I was gonna do because I didn't know how to film, I didn't know how to edit. And I was like, I guess I'll figure it out. And I bought a little camera And then I remember making sketches. I was like, I'm gonna call it the Internet Shack. I'm gonna build out a corner of my studio to just look like a shack, and I'm gonna talk about the internet, maybe, like critique stuff. I had no idea. And at that same time, Mike Aho moved back from Costa Mesa to Austin, and he's a very accomplished videographer who works for Volcom, but he was like, maybe we could team up on this thing. I was like, yes, that would be amazing. So it started out as just being this like really manic, weirdly edited kind of variety show.
We were both kind of like really into Wet Hot American Summer at the time, and just kind of like envisioned this world where that could be some kind of thing that's like a skate version of that, I guess, you know? Kind of an amalgam of a bunch of shit, you know, like everything from Saturday morning terrible sitcom stuff with like really obvious laugh tracks, and dude, this fly.
We had to turn in one a week, so it was like, we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just trying to pump out some content. And pretty quickly, we realized we were leaning more towards narrative writing. We're like, it'd be kind of cooler if we're telling little stories, if these become little episodes instead of just manic and weird non sequitur jokes.
In our heads, we were like, on Saturday Night Live or something, we'd fucking write every Monday, and then every Tuesday, we'd like shoot Wednesday, sometimes Thursday. I'd edit the entire thing on Thursday and Friday, including all the animations. And that just kind of like kept growing, because as we like learned how to write and then make the world bigger, I guess, you know, it was just like from a production standpoint, I'd get it all on the computer and be like, oh my God, I have to animate 8 characters in this scene and there's no humans in this shot. And then I'd do all that on Friday and we'd get it to Thrasher by like Friday late, and they'd put it up every Saturday.
We had for years talked about revisiting it, because we did 2 seasons and then it just kind of fizzled out. We just never revisited it, and we always discussed going back to it, and we're like, we should do a 10-year anniversary issue that's like puts a bow on it. If we never do another one, that's fine, but just something that feels like it's a little bit of a finale. And so, yeah, Mike was able to talk to Volcom and get some funding for it. And we shot this little 30-minute episode that's just called Camp Ramp, but it's set 10 years in the future. So I'm working in a cubicle and find out someone has reopened the camp. Not me, but my twin brother, Mark, who has taken out a bunch of shady loans to get the camp up and running. And I have to go and confront him. And that's where it gets everyone up to speed on what's been going on at Camp Ramp from the past 10 years. A hamburger still in the refrigerator?
What you doing, hamburger?
Mainly my advice would be like, slow down and work on your craft a little bit until it feels like it's at a good point to present it. Because if you are presenting half-formed ideas, it's easy to just brush them aside. So maybe work a little longer, be patient, present your work whenever it feels like there's something about it that feels like you.
Yeah, there's just like a little bit of a darkness there, you know? And I think that's probably the case with everybody who's really funny, you know? Like, they're really funny because they see through the bullshit and they call it out.
I really value dudes like him that are continuing to raise the bar, because it continues to push me as I get older. And I think we should all be so lucky as to have those kind of contemporaries that are, you know, very funny, very productive. We have very different like lives and lifestyles, and we live in different places. But I hope that he continues to motivate me and inspire me right up until one of us drops dead.
You don't know what's going to happen when you put something out there. Somebody can see your shirt today and go buy that shirt. You just influence somebody. So it made me realize we can all do that.
I sometimes forget, but I'm really lucky to get to work with him, because he's so talented, but he's not hell-bent on showing off. He doesn't need to be the center of attention. He doesn't need to be like the star, and I think you can kind of see that in the stuff that he produces, in the magazine and outside of the magazine.
Yeah, being in the position I'm in, whether it's like people sending over skate graphics, like I'd like to do a Roger graphic, or if it's like, check out my sponsor me tape, or whatever the content is, a lot of times it's just like fits into like a sea of similarity in that it's like, cool, this looks like a lot of other stuff. So try to figure out a way to put a spin on it and like make it stick in someone's head, however you can do so.